Hey, sculpture class. So we have our drawings that we're working on to make, well, we have a drawing, hopefully. That's what you need to do right away. And then, well, last video we talked about um, making, first we made a wireframe, basically like a skeleton. And then I talked to you about thickening it up with foil. Okay, so this is my drawing I was working on of a hand in a glove catching a ball. And then we got this armature, which I had wanted it to be an actual size, which I ended up making the wire a tiny bit bigger, which is a good learning lesson for you, because this is an actual scale I wanted it to be, which is about, yay big, not quite a foot. And this is getting the actual size of the drawing already, so I needed to make it a little smaller. I got off a little bit there, but I don't have time to redo it for the sake of our videos because we're running out of time in class here. So I wanted to make sure I make a note to you guys, which is you need to keep your drawing in front of you when you're working and be referencing it a lot. Because if you're trying to capture something accurately and you're trying to make sure that you are getting what you intend, which is the planning stages, then you need to be able to reference it. And so referencing it means not putting it away in the book, not having it away in your sketchbook, but actually working with it here on the desk in front of you so you can look at it over and over again. So that's something that seems obvious, but it's really important. Does that mean you have to make your drawing exactly, the sculpture perfectly fit exactly like the drawing? No, you do not, but you want to have the idea clearly there. So you've gone through the steps to make a drawing, and then you've made a wire armature, and you have thickened it up, most likely. And then you have your oil clay, which is like this. I had some questions about the oil clay and compatibility with water-based clay. I answered them in a post announcement for you guys as to where you could get more if you needed to, and also if it'll work well with water-based clay, which it doesn't really. Now, this stuff is not going to dry on you, and I think I want to make something clear right off the bat, which is it's going to be easier to work with it, they say, a lot of people say, and it's true, in small little bits. So some of you already in your bags have it sort of cut up into little sections. That's so you can model with it. If you have more of a block, like a mountain there, you need to kind of rip it off. You could use a knife, like one of those knives that you're using to sculpt with, like a ceramic tool or even just a butter knife, and do this. Mine's pretty soft, so I can just do it with my hand. If it gets too hot, this oil clay will kind of droop and get funny because it's oil based, which means if you work like under a really hot light, you could soften it up a lot, but also means you don't want it to get overheated so it doesn't lose its shape. So sometimes when you're working, if you want to do a lot of fine detail, you might have to cool it down a little, which means putting your sculpture in the refrigerator, even. It'd be a little creepy. Someone open it up, make sure you tell everyone, there's a sculpture of a monster in the refrigerator, don't be surprised, depending on what you're making. But you can do that as a trick or tip. Another one is to just kind of not touch it for a while and make sure it's not in the sunshine, sitting out in the sunshine the whole time. So those are important things. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of get some pieces set up like that. I'm going to do quite a few of them. If I have a big block, I don't need to do the whole block's worth because I might not need it all. And I can always grab some afterwards, but I have a fair amount there. And I have my armature, I have my sketch over here. where do I get started? Well, anywhere I feel like it. But for me, I'm going to start just by building up and adding some mass to the arm and modeling it out. You'll see it's going to stick. I can kind of like make it into little fleshy pieces and start putting it on there. I don't have to worry too much about getting all the detail at all right now, because what's my first step is just to block out the form, which means if you were drawing, like, you would be getting the big shape. If you take some of you I know in class have taken my drawing class with me before, this would be the equivalent of getting the giant box or the big shapes everything can fit inside of. Or like with your drawing, you block out the big overall shapes, like of a car you would do, you know, the big rectangle. Well, you have the big overall armature shape. Now you need to add the skin, so to speak, onto it. And I'm just going to kind of do it pretty, honestly, pretty roughly. Not like messily, like I'm making sure it's connected, but I'm not worried about if I'm going to have to take away a little bit later. Well, luckily, it's clay, so it's very malleable. I can cut some pieces off if I need to. But the nature of my object is that the object I'm making that's meant to be an arm, is that it's not going to be like super thick on the arm. It's going to be more like the fatty. You can think about this as adding like the fatty tissue skin layer to it. So I don't want to go too thick on this one. Yours might be a little different. If you're doing a body parts or something, you may want to thicken it up more in some areas, even more, to like get the limbs, the the feeling of muscle on legs and things like that, like the calf. You're gonna want to make it thicker there. But you're not trying to be too perfect. You're just trying to add some of it on there and get the rough shape of it. Like, if you get some too much on there, it sticks pretty well to itself. Sticking well to the foil and the duct tape, that's not a problem. So that's working for me pretty well. I'm gonna want to push, too hard. I can still mess with my wire armature up until pretty soon here. When it's blocked out, I could still mess with it without ruining the details. So if you're making a figure in a pose that's more like nuanced, you're going to want to make sure after you get it blocked out like this that you kind of make sure you pose it right before you start adding or taking away any kind of clay to make the details, because you don't want to get all the details done and then end up with a situation where you actually have to, the pose doesn't look very convincing and you have to undo them. That's why we block things out in drawing and in sculpture, because when you're doing this kind of modeled live sculpture, because you want to really get the work from big to small. So you don't want to jump in when you're making a face and try to make the eye perfectly accurate right away, because you might have to move the eye if it's not in the right location. So you can see how I'm building it up. I want to make a note, like when you're carving details, or say you had a face that you want to draw. Okay, you have a head. Can you see that? Not really well. Let's see if I have a Sharpie. Okay. Say you're doing a head, right? Okay. Well, you're going to be smart to, this is drawing it, I'm drawing it sideways, so it's not going to be perfect. You're going to be smart to kind of give yourself a guide on your actual sculpture, like you would with, if you have your, if this was a head, I would actually go like this, and on it give myself a guideline. That way I can kind of put things in the right spot. Okay. And you're going to notice that this stuff's really responsive, so you can use a lot of different types of tools to carve it with or get into the detail with. This is just a regular pencil and it works pretty well, so it's pretty cool like that. And then I'm going to post probably some a little bit of information. I might do the lecture or post the lecture of the proportions of the head that I usually do for drawing, because some of you are talking to me and I'm seeing that you're going to be doing sculptures with the head or busts or things, so it'd be good for you to know about that, as well as if you're doing a figure, it's important to know that you should use the head height. So if this is the head height, to kind of establish the size of the body. If it's a kid, it's going to be different. If it's a man and woman, they're slightly different, but generally between 5 to 6 head heights. With kids, it can go down to even 4.5, depending on their age and the size of their head at that age compared to their body. But you have about 6 head heights from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet, and the waist is somewhere in between. People are different, you know, there's this rough kind of geometry to it, but then the individual little variations is what make people look so real in themselves compared to everyone else, because generally we all have a roundish head with 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, right? But the little variations of how far the eyes are from each other, things like that, are what make people. And as part of that, generally speaking, there's like 1 eye width between the eyes. And there's a lot of kind of things like the pupils hit at a certain on the edge of the mouth usually. The eyes are in the middle of the head. The nose goes down the middle line. The side of the nostrils is usually the inside portion of the eyes, the edge of the nostrils, things like that, which I'll tell you guys about in that little lecture. But it's going to depend on, you know, what you're really trying to capture individually. The person is going to vary a little bit. And there's other things like the eyebrows are generally the top of the ears, stuff like that. So I'm quickly just sketching that out. But to make something convincing in this way, you want to do something specific, not so generic. Unless it's really stylized. But if you're going for something kind of convincingly naturalistic, you want to think about the individuality of the particular hand or glove, or in this case, baseball glove and hand, or, you know, the individuality of the particular face that you're sculpting. Even if you're inventing the person, like it's not someone you can see in life, then you still want to think about that stuff. If you are doing someone from life, you know, pictures and things, that would be cool too, and then you can reference that. But either way, that's why your drawings are going to be so important. So I'm going to keep building up that with some small pieces around. It's looking like I'm starting to feel like I got the wrist a little too thick right there, so I'm going to kind of mess with that. See right there? And I'm realizing to make the hand in there realistic with a glove on it, I'm going to have to go kind of thin on top with the first layer, and then build it up thicker on top in the right zones, because baseball gloves have padding in them, right, for example. So this is the idea of this, is to keep building up the surface. So I'm going to pause it for a second and build this up a little bit more, and then I'll be back in just a minute. So I'll see you in just a moment. Started covering it over a lot more, and you can see that I got it all like a skin covered all over the whole thing. I didn't worry too much about the whole bottom because I have the foil down there, but I probably will put it on there eventually. Mostly I just wanted to make sure I used it enough to stabilize it. So I've got it where I can actually have it stand up and have a look at it. So what we got going on here is, this is the sculpture. Oop. And this is my drawing here. And I'm trying to make sure we're going in the right direction with it. So I've got my drawing here, and I got my sculpture. It's starting to get like where it's feeling, you know, somewhat accurate. But I'm realizing as I'm looking at it, the hand is getting too big and mitten-like compared to it. So if you look at this right here, there's like a feeling that this is getting too big of a mitten. So I'm going to have to come in here and mess with that and and kind of go, okay, let's see, get it a little more bent, because I don't want that to feel like it's totally wide. So at this point what I'm doing is I'm actually bending on some of the wire, not just pushing, I'm pushing on the wire and some of the foil and the clay at the same time. And now you can see that it's starting to feel a little bit more like it's like the finger is inside the glove are turning a little bit better. Oh, you can see it better like that maybe. Okay, so this is what I'm saying to you when I'm saying you gotta play with the big shapes before you start doing the detail, because even like things on this, like I'm looking at it and I'm gonna go start kind of messing with the wrist being thinner and thicker right here. It feels a little thick on the forearm also, for example, so I'm going to try to thin that down a little bit by just kind of mushing around the clay. And then if I needed to, I would also take like a knife, butter knife or something, or if I have ceramic tools, if you have some at home, and actually shave off some of this if you need to with like a loop or something. You can do that. But right now what I'm doing is just kind of making sure the overall shape is starting to feel like it's making sense for what I'm drawing. And as I'm trying to move it, I'm realizing the foil is popping through. That's okay, because I need to get that shape right. More than anything, I can add more foil. Add more clay to cover over the foil. I'm trying to get that big shape right. And I'm realizing that this piece I'm going to have a little bit of a struggle with the gloved hand. That's okay though, I can fix it. I'm bending it a little at a time. And I can add some more oil clay to build up those sections like inside the glove and the thickness of the fingers. But surprisingly, pretty quickly it's starting to feel like, okay, it's got some kind of realism starting to happen. And like I said, I can really mess with it. Some of the wires starting to pop through here a little bit. So that's going to be my difficult in quotes section. So I'm going to have to work with that a little bit more. If that happens, what do? Well, I've got it in the right zone, so I just take and add more oil clay to cover it over thinly in those spots. But for me, I don't need to worry too much about thinness because I actually need to build up on the back some of the feeling of like the gloved fingers. So I'm going to actually do things similar like I did on the mask projects, which I didn't introduce it to you, but the way I taught Emily to and the way you learned would be to like create some shapes, like see like a circular sausage-ish type of shape that you can put on there and start, messing with, like, so it gets the feeling of the gloved fingers, because the oil clay is going to stick to itself pretty well, so you're all good on that. You can kind of, mess with it. You add some shapes instead of trying to carve it all away, right? You're modeling it, so you can keep kind of messing with those things. So, there's that. This is going to drop down a little into the webbed part in between, right? And I know this needs to blend down, so I'm just kind of building it up as I go. The shape, the mass of it. Not trying to be too specific at all yet, right? Just really, this part over here is where the thumb is. If you look, this is a right-handed glove, right? So you have to, let's see if I got that right. Where would the thumb be? Right there. So that's the thumb, that's the fingers. So these are the fingers. So look what I did already. I made a mistake. The fingers should be over here, not there. So I just realized that. So how did I do that? Well, I was looking at the drawing, looking at the back of the drawing, but I hadn't established what the back to the front looked like which side was which, left and right. So I'm off a little bit there, in my drawings. So this is a right hand, right? Is what I'm trying to say. Well, this is a left hand. So when I did my drawings without paying attention to it, I drew the back of a left hand and the front of a right hand. So, because here's the thumb, and if it's facing this way, then it's the right hand. And facing that way, it's a left hand. So I mixed them up, so this should actually be over there. So didn't even realize I did that in my drawing until I started making it. Which is an interesting thing about making and drawing, different. When you have to make it in space, you start realizing the in-between parts you don't have to worry about in your drawing that are actually not right. So that's funny. Didn't even know that until I started doing this. So I had that right before. So here's the finger, the thumb, there's the other side. So I would actually go on here when I'm doing this, might go thumb, fingers, and I'm writing with a pencil in the oil clay. That way I know, and I can start to do things like, see how that should be like that? I can start to go, okay, here is the webbed part right here, and just draw a little bit on it and try to get the proportions somewhat accurate, and kind of mark it off. So see how the drawing is? Now I'm having to reverse it, but you see how I can mark on there and get things somewhat accurate. So I can say, okay, 1, 2, 3, they're all kind of the same size. So I need to mess with those a little bit. One of them's supposed to be kind of turning over, so that would be 1, 2, 3. So I can get this proportion 1, 2, 3, right? So I'm going to deal with that type of stuff. Is this making sense? Hopefully. What I'm dealing with when I say deal with that type of stuff is starting to figure out the proportions and where things are going to belong on the sculpture. Like how far down does the webbing go on this side, right? This is the thumb hand. Where does it go? It's up in here. I want to mark it off, right? And where are the other things at? That's one of the fingers. There's one here. So I can kind of check them on each side and make sure I'm doing them the same width. The ball's going to go right here-ish, so I'm going to put that in. I definitely need to thicken up some of this part of the glove too, is what it shows me. And the thumb would be in proportion a thumb compared to your arm, right? So I can do it on my own hand. Just go 1 is about the same as my palm, right? And if I do it again, I have a pretty long thumb, maybe 1, 2, 3. It's about 3 of these. So 1, 2, 3. So I could say that the thumb is about up to there. And the palm should be about the same size, which it is, so I'm looking good. So all this is the extra part of the glove that holds it up. And if the thumb is about to the middle knuckle of the top of your thumb is about to the middle knuckle on your pointer finger, and it kind of goes like that. So I'm establishing top of the thumb there, middle knuckle, so this is going to be the space, but when it moves over it gets smaller. So the space is going to be here, the fingers are going to be in here, right? Is this making sense to you, hopefully? And I'm thinking about where the hand is inside of it, because it'll help me keep this feeling accurate. Even though it's a big old glove, it's made to fit on top of a hand. So what I mean by doing all this is to kind of check my drawing, see if it's feeling accurate proportions, and then start using it to think about the space, like how big the palm is compared to the ball, how big the ball is compared to this netting basket part, back and forth to try to figure things out like that, okay? And I want to do all this and get it blocked out by adding clay and also doing a little bit of direct kind of drawing on there. Like you would if you were carving wood, you would draw on the side of it. And you'd have a drawing, and first the big block, you would just draw on it and start chipping away. The drawing disappears, so then you start looking at the drawing on the wood starts disappearing, so you start looking at your plan, your drawing, and sometimes you have to go back in and reassert it, redraw it on the sculpture. So that's part of the process. So it's looking pretty good. I'm coming along, and I'm kind of working my way through it. And I'm doing those type of markings to like help myself figure out stuff. So now I'm realizing, okay, I'm doing pretty good, but I need to add some more density to a few spots. One of them being like this edge over here of the fingers coming in. So I'm going to start adding some of that. But I gotta make it feel smooth, like it's a part of the whole thing. So I gotta add it and then smooth it in. Another area I'm feeling like I'm realizing I need to add a lot more density is the palm of the hand here. So to get the padding, there's a padding in a glove if you ever used one before. I need to get that padding in there. So I need to make it thicker than a hand would be, right? So that's what I'm starting to do here. And I know that the baseball's going to sit within it, so I'm okay there. I'm going to keep building that up a little bit more. So this is, it's going to take a while. And modeling's a good process. You can add little bits, and then you can take away and add. So when we say modeling, we really mean additive and subtractive. It's not like just additive, it's like adding and then you scraping away and pulling some off and stuff. Whereas carving, like traditional carving, once you take away, it's very hard to add it back. It's not impossible, but like you knock off a huge piece of the wood, you can like smooth it out, glue it back up, try to reconnect it, but it's pretty more of a permanent type of removal. Whereas this here, you can carve into it, add it back, and change it. So it's a little more, it's good for us as when we're beginners because we have a chance to kind of fix our mistakes a little bit more, right? So that's going to be an important part of this whole thing is just kind of being patient with yourself, I guess is what I'm really trying to say, and realizing that like you're not going to get it right every time right away. You're going to have to like mess with it, add and take away, and get it, sorted out the way you want. Especially, things that are like more observational, naturalistic of the body and the things that we know are supposed to look a particular way. We can get pretty frustrated with them, but it's okay to, just take your time and keep at it, keep messing with it, and just look at it, take a breather if you get frustrated, get something off, pause for a moment and figure it out like I was doing with the drawing. I realized I had something backwards, so it was messing me up. I was like, why is this not happening right? Oh, my drawing got messed up and I didn't even realize it until I was on camera with you guys, so that was fun. I'm okay with that though because that's how we learn. You can see that I made a mistake. It's good because you don't make mistakes, and the process is not don't make any mistakes ever. The process is you make mistakes, how do you fix them, and how does that make the art interesting? Because we're not, we're human. Humans make mistakes. That's how we make art. So we kind of learning to fix our mistakes is a large part of art making. Like things go wrong, processes don't go the way you want them to, then how do you actually change it, fix it, make it something awesome, even if it's not exactly like you thought at first? Or how do you get it back on track and get it as close as you can to what you wanted, which is the goal, So that's kind of what we're working through here. And I'm liking how the arm is starting to come together, and I'm feeling like, okay, every bit of the step of the way is becoming more like the glove, right? It's not there yet, of course, but you can start to see a feeling of the glove happening in it. And then when you look at it standing up, it's going to be interesting to feel like a gloved hand is coming out of the ground. That's my goal, as like possible public art project for me. So I'm working it through like that, kind of going down each step of the way. What I mean by working it through, I'm just blocking it out, looking at it, looking at my drawing, going back and forth, paying attention to what's happening. You'll notice right now also that I'm not trying to make the baseball yet because I really want to get the glove worked out pretty well before I add that in. I'm going to add it in pretty soon though, before I start doing any kind of detail work. But first I want to have a chance to kind of just play with this glove shapes and make sure I'm getting something that feels pretty convincing that way before I start trying to add that in, because it's going to be a big round shape in the middle of it, and I kind of don't want it to mess with it right at first. Okay, so that's something you think about, the order in which you do things, depending on your drawing and your sculpture that you're making. You're going to want to think about what's the best order. I'm going to say to you that for sure the order is, think of the way in which bodies and figures develop off their skeleton, right? You have the bones, and then you have growth on top of that of muscle and fat, and like, so the meat of a person, organs, all that develops their shape. Same with animals. So you're going to want to go and do that big parts of the so-called meat of the person, animal, figure, and kind of get the big shapes of that before you start doing anything that would be on top of it, like a hat or clothing, or or something that's wearing or holding, or yada yada. You get the idea. So in this case, the meat of it's the skeleton, then there's the meat, which is the hand and the arm, and then now I kind of got that in a general shape. Now I'm doing the glove, right? Thickening it up to be like the glove, and then I'll add the ball because the ball is in the glove. And when I go to add the ball, I'm actually going to make a ball and then push it in there and kind of sort it so it feels like it's separate, but I'll figure out where I want to connect it and have a connecting spot at the back to make it feel like it's separate but be connected. Does that make sense, hopefully? I want it to be like in the round, and then I want to figure out where I want to put it, and I'd probably flatten out part of it and then make it so that it joins better by maybe interlocking with some hash marks. You don't have to do that with this clay, but that can help you have interlocking bits when you do that. And then I'll put it on there and it'll stick and will feel like it's separate, like a separate ball, even though it's all one piece, one object, one sculpture. Okay, so that's something to think about too. When you have, like, if you had, some of you submitted some pictures that had like hats on or flowers in the hair or something like that, you're going to want to think about how you do that in that way. Okay, so another thing here I'm thinking about is how this area right here is the kind of webbed part of the glove. I don't know what you call it. I think maybe the basket, but there's an actual name for it. I'm realizing as I'm going that that part needs to be a little thinner. So I'm going to push in and kind of try to thin it out a little bit. I'm noticing that I'm getting to almost the foil there, which is okay, because that means I just need to add a little bit more to some of the other sections. And just like you did with the mask and stuff, think about building with things like coils and blobs. So if something like a long shape, like this is right here for mine, is a gloved finger, then I'm going to actually make a coil that's about that length, and then I'm going to push it in there like that and deal with that and like help it become more realistic looking. Where on the back I would do that too, right? Something where I actually do half a coil or a bit of one to make it feel like that, right? How they're joined together. So little like glove pieces that are joined together with the leather straps. That's what I'm talking about when I say joined together. So I want to kind of keep those undercuts that make it look more realistic. Okay, so it's a process you're going to go through adding. At first it'll kind of look like a big lump. As the lump gets more accurate, then you get more and more detail added. So once I get the shape in there, then that's when I'm going to start going in and adding some of these details. Like when I go in and add, like for example, this later on, I'm going to actually, do these little pieces, make them really thin, but I'll do the X marks on there. And I'll actually make them stick out. And they're supposed to come out of holes, so I'll actually like kind of make a little hole area that feels like it's there. And when I'm tying things together, I'll probably maybe, like some of these are supposed to look tied because they're glove pieces. I'll actually probably like try to get it really thin and see how it would feel to try to tie it. If I can tie it, I'll tie it, but if not, then I gotta pay attention to the shape and how things wrap over each other, you know? So some of these things I can actually almost tie to make them look like they're tied. Stuff like that. So you're gonna have to add, you know, a lot of details eventually by adding little pieces on. But before you do any of that, you really got to get the big shape accurate, because you don't want to get all these little details added on there and then realize, oh no, the finger's in the wrong spot. That's not going to work very well for you. So, alright guys, take care. I hope you're doing well. This will be this Wednesday. You need to get, you know, your drawing, of course, should be done already. The wireframe you got to get done. You got to start building up the mass like this. So that means the wireframe and the foil. Start building up the clay mass, and then that way you have a few weeks to refine it and add some details onto your sculpture. So you got a good amount of work cut out for you, but you have plenty of time to do it. But you don't have enough time to sit around and, you know, watch. You can watch TV while you do it if you can work that way, but you don't have enough time to sit and not do it. Wait till the last minute. You can't do this project in 4 hours at the last day before it's due. So you got to break it up and keep on working on it. Okay. So stay safe out there. I think one thing is that's nice about art making is when there's a lot of intensity in the world, and you know you could get bored or whatever, sick of watching Netflix or whatever, that you can make something creative and you can stay home and have something to do. So this could be a really good creative outlet for you guys, and whatever you pick to make could help you process that a little bit. Maybe you need to make a COVID virus figure, I don't know, or something about the fact that you can't. Some people in other classes of mine are making things about the fact that you can't go get things as easily, so they're making stuff in response to their experience during this time. So that could be something you might be interested in as well. Alright guys, take care.